Chapter 3. The Unexpected Visitors. Justin barely had time to gather his thoughts when the sharp knock at the door startled him. His heart leaped into his throat. He had just spoken to Emily, and she knew Jessica wasn't feeling well. There was no reason for her to show up unannounced. So who was it? He checked his reflection in the full-length mirror by the door, smoothing his hair and wiping away the last traces of panic from his face. He approached the peephole cautiously, holding his breath. It wasn't Emily, it was worse. Two police officers stood on the porch. One, a tall, muscular black man with a no-nonsense expression, and the other, a fit woman with sharp eyes. Justin's mind raced. The cops? What are they doing here? His pulse quickened as questions flooded his thoughts. What did they know? Had they seen something? Had someone else? Coming, he shouted, making it sound like he was at the back of the house, deliberately slow to answer. His palms were slick with sweat as he wiped them on his jeans and opened the door. Hello, he said, his voice forced into something casual. He nodded at the two officers, hoping his smile didn't look as strained as it felt. The female officer, Rhea, spoke first, her voice crisp but polite. Hi, sir. Is everything all right here? Justin blinked, surprised by the question. Of course, why wouldn't it be? Officer Rhea glanced at her partner, Duke, before answering. A neighbor called in. Said they saw your front door open late last night and thought there might be a break-in. They were concerned, given the weather. The door. Justin's stomach clenched. He had forgotten to shut it after dealing with Jessica's body, hadn't he? Thinking quickly, he forced a chuckle. Oh, that. Yeah, I had the door open last night because we burned some popcorn. I wanted to air the place out. Duke's gaze sharpened, and Justin could feel his scrutiny, like a weight pressing down on him. We? Duke asked, his deep voice carrying an edge. Justin's mind raced. Careful. Don't overthink it. Yeah, my wife and I. She's upstairs, sleeping. She's not feeling great. Women's stuff. He tried to wave it off casually, though every muscle in his body tensed. Officer Rhea's eyes softened. Glad to hear everything's fine, sir. She turned, seemingly satisfied with his answer, and began to head back to the car. Justin almost sighed in relief. But before he could close the door, Duke's nose twitched. You cleaning up something in there? He asked, his eyes narrowing. I smell a lot of bleach. Justin froze for half a second before forcing a grin. Oh yeah, I've been cleaning the kitchen this morning. You know how it is, a messy house. He tried to keep his tone light, but inside, his stomach was in knots. Duke didn't look convinced. He lingered for a moment longer, but finally nodded. All right then. As the officers walked back to their car, Justin watched through the peephole, his heart hammering in his chest. They were talking, looking back at the house, and every nerve in his body screamed that they knew something was off. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his mind from spiraling. What had Miss Perry, the neighbor, actually seen? I'll have to deal with her, he thought coldly. Miss Perry and Jessica had been friends. This could complicate things. He couldn't afford any loose ends. Finally, the officers got into their cruiser and drove off, but the knot of tension in Justin's chest didn't loosen. He needed to stay ahead of this. He couldn't afford to get sloppy. After taking a deep breath, he headed upstairs to change clothes. He would pay Miss Perry a visit later, but for now, he needed supplies. Out on the road, the world felt different. Lighter, freer. Justin couldn't explain it, but for the first time since the previous night, he felt good, almost euphoric. As he drove, he noticed that everything red seemed to draw his attention. A stop sign, a red car, a fire engine. Each flash of red sent a strange thrill through his body. He smiled to himself, unable to suppress the growing elation. He was alive. Free. No one knew. The cops had bought his story. People driving by glanced at him with confused looks, probably thinking he was on something. But Justin wasn't high. He was simply high on life. A new life where he didn't have to pretend anymore. He was who he was. Finally. When he pulled into the parking lot of the corner supermarket, his mood was still buoyant. But as he got out of the car, a familiar voice stopped him cold. Justin? He turned, and there she was. Miss Perry standing by her shopping cart, her expression unreadable. For a moment, his mind whirled. What does she know? He plastered a smile on his face. Miss Perry. How have you been? She returned the smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm fine, Justin. How's Jessica? Her voice held a slight edge, like she was testing him. Jessica? Justin laughed lightly. She's got a bit of a cold, but nothing serious. Just resting at home. Miss Perry's gaze shifted, and she looked away, avoiding his eyes. Well, I hope she gets better soon. Her voice was softer now, almost distracted. Me too, Justin replied, the grin still plastered on his face. See you around, Miss Perry. But as she walked away, something about her body language was off. She hadn't been herself. She had barely kept eye contact with him, her movements stiff, awkward. She knows something, he realized with a sinking feeling. And I'm going to find out what. Justin's mind was already working, calculating his next move. Miss Perry was a complication, one he'd have to deal with sooner rather than later. As he walked back to his car, a strange thrill surged through him again. Everything around him felt brighter, more intense. Everything's under control, he told himself, though deep down, he knew it wouldn't be for long.